Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology and creator of the Salesology prospecting method. And I am also known as the queen of cold calling. And today, my very, very special guest is Ben Gioia. He is a 4-time best-selling author, podcast, and international radio show host. His teachings are used by more than 80,000 leaders and game changers. Ben helps folks write great books in as little as 5 weeks. I'm going to have to ask him how he does that. He helps them enjoy 5-figure speaking fees and attract 6-figure consulting, even before publishing, and I'm going to have to ask him about that as well. Ben has trained hundreds of millionaires and helped a Fortune 100 create an empathy video game. He helped launch the world's largest magazine, that's AARP, and he won a patient services award from the ALS Association. So welcome, Ben Gioia.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thank you for that. And so let us begin at the beginning, which is where I always begin. How did you become a book coach, a strategist, a publishing advisor? How did that all happen?
Yeah, thank you for asking. A kind of funny story. I changed my business name on LinkedIn one year, just on my personal profile. My original business was Marketing with a Heart. Right. My first book was called Marketing with a Heart. And I realized I didn't want to just be the marketing guy. So I changed the business name to Influence with a Heart. And somebody reached out to me through LinkedIn. Right. We love LinkedIn. Somebody reached out and they said, hey, we're an event planning company facilitating a 2-day training at Stanford University. These visiting business people from one company are coming from Sydney, Australia. They're going to tour around Silicon Valley, go to Google and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. Then they're going to come to Stanford for 2 days of influence and leadership training. Do you want to give that training? And I was like, oh my God, of course I want to give that training. Right? So we figure out all the details. We sign the contract. And the person says to me, oh, we're so excited that you're coming to do this training. I said, it's my pleasure. And by the way, and I had learned this from a business coach of mine. I said, by the way, I'm going to make this really special. I'm going to show up with autographed copies of my brand new book for everyone in the audience and for your staff. So like 130 free books. She's like, wow, that's super generous. That's really going to be meaningful. I said, you're welcome. We hung up the phone and I went, oh, crap. I have to write that book that I just promised in time for this event. And this event is 6.5 weeks away from the promise that I just made. And that was the beginning of everything.
Okay. So, well, I'm going to have to ask you how you managed to do that. But before I ask you that question, I have to ask you why Influence with a Heart?
Thank you.
Where did your business name come from? I mean, yeah, I understand you changed it, but there was both names had from the heart or with a heart. So
yeah, thank you. So service has always been a big part of my existence. You know, something that I learned from my family and was modeled in my family. And then I had a let's call it an interesting experience the first time I traveled in India, where in the space of 72 hours I faced death 4 times. So my bus almost going off a mountain road and then running from a wildfire and then almost stepping on a poisonous snake and then encountering a mountain lion. So I managed to get through all of that unscathed. And in the next couple of days of kind of processing that whole experience, I really figured out or was reminded of, first of all, hey, it's great to be alive. And it really galvanized my purpose in a big way. So I want to help a bunch of people and do business, right? Because business can really impact the world in a powerful and profound way, but it has to be done from the heart, because so much business, is dodgy and, just people and companies just doing what they can do for the bottom line and not looking at the whole, people, profit, planet, bigger picture. So that was where the heart came from for me.
Okay, well, that makes an awful lot of sense. That does not sound like a dream vacation, though. Um, so, how did you manage to write a book in and publish a book in 6.5 weeks? I have written 2 books, and each one took me about a year. So, how'd you do it? What's the secret?
Thank you. So I had the benefit of having written a book previously. So it wasn't the first book, thank goodness. And I did a couple of things to make it as easy as possible. I started with literally duplicating the book file from the first book. And I followed the same format. I followed the same word count, just played within the space, basically. And then there were a couple of things from my previous book that made sense to carry over to the second book, like my operating principles, for example. So I made sure to keep some of those things in there, kept my bio the same. So I kept as much as I could legitimately intact. And then from there, looked at current writing that I had in blogs and a few other places and got that all in there. And then the rest of it just kind of put together as quickly as possible and got it out the door. So it was definitely a bit of a mess, but it was good enough. And very often good enough is what you need to move forward. And I took my own advice instead of being my historical perfectionist self and made sure to make it happen.
Okay. So you are talking about self-publishing, correct? Not traditional publishing. And so what's the difference, and why should sales professionals, business owners think about self-publishing?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great question. So when we talk about self-publishing, that does not mean publish the book yourself, right? Do not do the work yourself, right? In the same way that you don't want to fix your own plumbing or your own electrical, right? Have a professional do the work for you, because there's, depending who you're talking to, 400 to 700 steps to the process of creating it the right way, making the right formats, designing the cover, doing the keyword research, and I can go down and down the list, right? So hire a professional to do professional self-publishing for you, first and foremost. Secondly, traditional
that's after you've written the book.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. For clarity, after you've written the book, you hire a professional. You're not talking about hiring a ghostwriter.
No. I mean, that hiring a ghostwriter is a way to go, but it's often very expensive for a quality ghostwriter, and there's that risk of not having your authentic voice in the book, and there's also the risk of, hey, you didn't write the book, right? So, I know most of the people that I work with, they want to actually write the book themselves. It's really, really important for them to tell their story, share their message. So coming back around to the traditional publisher, which is what most of us grew up with hearing about, I hope the publisher picks my book and maybe the agent will shop my book around. First of all, you can avoid all of that, right? You don't have to hire an agent. You don't have to hire a publishing company. The two of them together, a traditional publishing company, because the two of them together, first and foremost, will take about 90% of the royalties from your book, right? So if you sell a $16 book, maybe you get $1 on the book sale. So that's one tremendous drawback. Another one is that a traditional publisher owns your book. They own the intellectual property. So you sign over your book to them when you sign the contract with them. So I don't know about you, but I don't want to give up my book to anyone. I don't want to give up creative control. I don't want to give up timeline control, right? It's my book, damn it. Right? So that's another part of it. And then, and this is where it gets really crazy, a lot of publishers, traditional publishers, will require a minimum number of books to be sold in X amount of time. So let's say, for example, you're required contractually to sell 4,000 books in the first 2 months, and you're only able to sell 2,000 books. According to the contract, you have to buy back the remaining 2,000 books from the publisher at retail. So if your books are selling for $20, all of a sudden you owe your publisher $40,000. Not cool.
Not cool. Not cool. So why should a business owner or a sales professional think about writing a book in the first place? I'm sure there are people that they just want to write a book, but what about everybody else? Why should they be thinking about writing a book?
Yep. So thank you for asking. Quite a few reasons. So to stand out as a unique expert or authority or thought leader in your space, right? Whatever word you want to use there. You know, if you're a speaker, it's really important to have a book. A lot of times, you know, there's the comparison between two speakers speaking on the same topic, and they'll pick the hiring agency or the company will pick the speaker with the book, right? Because it looks like they know what they're talking about. It's a great way to gather, you know, your curriculum, if you will, into a space and get it out of your head and into a form that not only is usable in a way to help you get leads and clients and opportunities, but it's also a great tool to be able to repurpose into all sorts of other content without reinventing the wheel. So for example, if you write a good book and dial it into your business appropriately, you've essentially done the content for 80% of a season of a podcast, right out of the gate. And I'm not saying you have to go do a podcast, not at all, but just there's all sorts of possibilities with your book to repurpose. I love suggesting to my authors, hey, get hardbound versions of your book, printed, sign them, put a little note in there and send them to your ideal clients, right? How cool does that look if somebody receives a hardcover version of your book? Can you imagine that opening the door to a conversation? And can you imagine that also getting the conversation started? Because hopefully that person will have read at least some of the book before they get on a call with you, and they already have that opportunity to start to know you and like you and trust you and be on the path, we hope, to saying yes to you.
Right. And having a book also gives you enormous credibility. Exactly. And I don't know if you experience this or if any of your clients have experienced this, but in my experience, my first book was Cold Calling for Women, came out in 2000. It had a big pink phone on the cover. And when I started telling people that I was writing a book, I hadn't even written it yet. I was just going to write it. People would be so impressed. And it gave me such credit. I was just starting my business. And I would tell all my prospects, oh, yeah, well, I'm writing a book. And I hadn't even written the thing yet. So I thought that was really amazing. Could you speak to that, the level of credibility that a book will give you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I appreciate you saying that. Something that I teach my authors and anybody who will listen, right, is to leverage the book before it's published, before it's even written. Like exactly like you did, tell people that you're the forthcoming author, even if you don't know the book title, you know, a book about X, because people will immediately think you know something. People will immediately be impressed. They never have to actually read the book. I mean, we hope they do. We want them to read the book. But even if they don't, you're going to get a whole bunch of credibility, to use the word again, just by people understanding that that book is coming. I had a beautiful experience after I did that talk at Stanford where I wrote the books really quickly. While I was writing the book, I had somebody design the book cover. made a nice 3D version. I put it up on LinkedIn and I said, hey, look, I'm writing this book. It's coming out in a couple months. I'm really excited, right? And somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, we're creating a mindfulness and empathy video game with a Fortune 100 company and MIT. It's going to be played by 20,000 people. Would you like to write the curriculum? And I said, of course, I'd like to write the curriculum. And that turned into 10 months of consulting, all because they saw the cover of my unfinished book. And that was the beginning of the conversation, the relationship, and what turned into, almost a double six-figure consulting contract. And that was like, 7 times more money than I had made the year before. So suddenly I went from struggling entrepreneur to, oh my goodness, I think I know how to make this thing work now. And it was really a game changer.
Well, I do have to ask, did you also include a copy of the book for each person in your consulting contract?
Not in the consulting contract, but I did for the Stanford speaking gig.
Right.
Show up with books for everybody. Yeah, the consulting contract, and I appreciate you saying that, because that is a good idea and a good strategy. It wasn't appropriate for the context, but I did give copies to all of the decision makers and all of the people on the creative team with me.
Hey, so when you were talking about your putting the book together in 6.5 weeks for the Stanford gig, you talked about having written a previous book and pulling all this content from other articles and blogs and other things you've written. What if you've never written what if you want to write a book and you've never written a book before and you don't have copious amounts of articles on your blog? How do you get your book done fairly quickly?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple things that I recommend and do with my clients, right? First is have conversations with your ideal clients about the book you're writing as you're getting it started, right? So not just questions of like, what do you think I should put in my book? But for me, I give my authors 11 questions to ask their ideal clients. And what those questions do is they give a lens for the book, like where to focus, where not to focus, the language to use, and it lays the groundwork for that person that they're talking to become a client or a strategic partner, right? So that's one of the side benefits. So you start with the conversations, you get the lens on the book, and then follow a blueprint, like use a book blueprint rather than trying to figure out the logistics for yourself, like follow a proven methodology to get the book done. Use dictation as part of the process. And again, not extemporaneous dictation, right? You don't want to just be talking and then try to unravel all your talking, but you outline a few points, a few talking points following a good communication formula. You dictate for 7 minutes, and in 7 minutes, you can have 1,200 words, and 1,200 words is 5% of a 25,000 word book, right? So conversations about the book, a method, a blueprint, and some dictation, and you can get a book done really fast in your authentic voice, and the quality can be really, really high because you're not trying to, oh my God, write the book. I'm not a good writer. What word do I put there? You're just speaking and sharing your story and your expertise. And that literally comes through your voice onto the paper.
That is so interesting that you say that, because when I'm working with clients and we want them to create sales scripts, I always recommend that they dictate, they talk into their voicemail, they talk onto the recorder on their phone, and then go write it down. Because then they're able to capture their authentic voice. Interestingly enough, most people don't do that. So we're going to pause here for a word from our sponsor. But when we come back, I'm going to hold Ben's feet to the fire, because I want to know how to get clients with your book, and also how to stop overthinking. Fair warning, I read an article on your website about overthinking, and I think many of us are guilty of that. So that's what I want to talk about next. But
Okay.
now a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. Just about every guest that I've interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has had a free gift for our listeners. And that includes my guest today, Ben Gioia. So what we've done is we've taken all of those gifts and we put them all in one place just for you. We call it the Salesology Vault, and it's packed full of free gifts from sales leaders, sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation experts, and we add another gift every single week. We release a podcast every Monday. When we do, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like and download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. The link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. You'll be glad you did. And I am back with my special guest, Ben Gioia. His company is Influence with a Heart, and he is a book coach, strategist, and publishing advisor. So let's talk about overthinking. That was a very interesting article that you had on your website. What is it, and how do you stop doing it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And for me, I don't try to stop overthinking, right? I try to more not get involved with my overthinking, right? It's really hard to make our minds stop doing things. It's hard to stop thoughts. I mean, if you're a deeply practiced meditator, then you can stop your thoughts, slow down your thoughts. But for the rest of us, most of the time, right, it's a madhouse in there, right? It's just that's easy for me to say, proliferation of ideas and thoughts, and then we get a text, and then we see something, and there's all these inputs that just keep making the thoughts happen. So for me, like I said, I try not to get involved. And what I teach my authors, and this is actually something that I learned from a meditation teacher, is to relax my head, relax my face, and smile and breathe. Right. So when the thoughts start getting loud, I'm not going to try to push them away. I'm going to try to just let them be over on the side, let myself relax, let myself smile, and let them kind of play themselves out in the background rather than trying to deal with them in the foreground. Right. Now, every once in a while, I might have to deal with them slightly if I'm having some, let's say, catastrophic thoughts of, oh, this is going to be terrible, or, oh, you totally screwed up that interview, or whatever that is. I might talk myself out of that and step back and say, you know what, you actually didn't. Maybe you made a few mistakes, but you probably did better than you think you did, because most of us are our own worst critics, right? That's just kind of baked into all of us, right? So again, I basically try not to get involved in the story that's running around in my head, and really do a lot with breathing, relaxing, smiling, and just letting it go. And something that I learned ultimately from the Buddha, I mean, I didn't speak to him directly, but through my teachers, right, is that all the things that are happening in our experience, including all the thoughts that come up, right, we didn't ask them to come up. Right? Maybe they have a reason that we can identify. Maybe they don't, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's just a bunch of impersonal experiences, right? They feel personal, don't get me wrong, but it's just impersonal stuff, right? So if it's impersonal, it's like, okay, I didn't ask for that. I'm not going to get involved. And easier that's said than done, of course, but if you kind of keep that perspective, and then every time you get that, start feeling that tension around whatever that thing is, relax your head, relax your face, and smile, and get back to writing your book or having the conversation with your loved one or whatever that is. And, don't take yourself so seriously in all of this.
So does that work as well with shiny object syndrome?
It does. It does. Yep. So the relaxing your head, relaxing your face, smile is very helpful. and also using some architecture, if you will, or some construction, like planning out your day, putting things on a calendar, or even planning out 30 minutes of work. These are the things I'm going to do. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to shoot for this one outcome. I'm going to turn off all the distracting things, put my phone in airplane mode, get rid of Facebook and the other things that can make noise. And I'm just going to focus on this one thing, right? So to keep the shiny objects out of my sphere of awareness, because I too can very easily go squirrel and go after that object. But if I can limit the input here, then that gives me a better possibility to stay on task for longer. I mean, Wendy, I don't know about you, but I feel like many of us in our generation who are creative entrepreneurial people are also undiagnosed ADD, ADHD, right? On in some way, shape, or form, right? So I think that serves us as entrepreneurs and squirrel at the same time. So what do we do with that? We give ourselves structure and just practice staying on target and not getting, for me, it's not getting hooked on the feeling of, ooh, that feels good, let me go in that direction, or ooh, that doesn't feel good, let me run away from that. But just how can I breathe and smile and relax and be like, okay, here's what's coming up. Let me not get involved and get back to what I need to be doing right now.
Yes, actually, my first career I was a ballet dancer. I danced in a ballet company, and we are very structured and disciplined because you can't go squirrel if you're a ballet dancer. It just doesn't work that well. And I know that when I first started my business, it was very hard for me to understand that kind of lack of organization because I grew up with it from the time I was a small child. It's like you just take your ballet class every day and that's what you do. And then you go do it the next day. And so I love what you're saying about giving your authors structure because I think, a lot of people really, they can't give themselves structure. They need somebody outside to give them the structure to be successful. So how do you use your book to get clients? Other than telling everybody that you know in the entire world that you are writing a book, but once it's done.
Yep. So thank you. So quite a few ways. So depending on your business model and strategy, and as I make some suggestions here, keep in mind, you don't want to try to implement 15 different strategies. Like really focus on what's going to help you get the most bang for the buck, or I like to say bang for the book, right? By focusing on just, a few high level strategies. So for me, speaking is fantastic, right? Whether it's live in person speaking or speaking on a podcast or a webinar or a summit, anything like that, because it's wonderful to be in a room or a virtual room with my ideal clients, right? That whole one-to-many aspect, and to be able to teach something from my book. So use my book as the centerpiece of what I'm talking about, right? Not just say, this is entirely what my book is about, but focus on like, here's an important lesson from my book about X, Y, or Z, right? So there's the content that's appropriate and relevant to the audience, and it is in the context of this book that I've written. And then I can guide people to the book if they want to read it, or just invite them to come speak with me. I also, like I did at Stanford, right? I showed up with a bunch of books for free as part of my speaking fee, right? So in that way, 130 people or 126 people from this one company all had my book, right? They did not have something digital from me that would disappear on their phone or on their computer, but they had something that actually sat on their desk or on a shelf at least. So I was physically present, top of mind, and that was tremendous, right? Because books are fabulous invitations to conversations, right? And giving people an opportunity to get to know you in a safe space, if you will, right? Because sometimes in my experience, right, I'll reach out to someone and say, hey, do you want to hop on a call? And they'll be like, no, I'm not really sure. Because they don't necessarily want to commit to like spending some time. But I'm like, hey, I'd love to share my book with you because of X, Y, and Z that I see you're doing. Right? Tell me what you think. And then they'll be like, oh, I read a little bit. That was great. Okay, great. Why don't we have a call now? Let's see how we can support each other. Let's see how we can collaborate. Maybe it would just be nice to meet another human being. Right. So using the book as a conversation piece, and as a way to an active conversation piece, and also as a way to get the conversation started, is really fantastic. And then, giving the book away for free, bundling it in other things that I'm giving away, or bundling it in things that other people are giving away is a great way to do it. It's the list is kind of limitless, which is nice. If you can think of a way to use your book, then use it.
Absolutely. This is such an important topic because I know from personal experience that writing my first book, Cold Calling for Women with the big pink phone on the cover, helped me launch my business. Before that, I was transitioning from dancing. I had done business development on behalf of clients on and off for years. It was kind of my day job when I wasn't dancing. And I said, well, what do I know how to do that people will pay me for? And I took a course at the Learning Annex in New York City on how to be $1,000 a day consultant. This was a long time ago. And given by Fred Gleek. And his whole thing was write a book. You become an expert. And he gave us an outline, basically. Here's how you write a book. Nice. And I went home and I said, what do I know how to do that people will pay me for? Oh, I know how to cold call. I'll write a book on cold calling. And it took me a year, but it enabled me to transition out of dancing and start my business. So thank you. It's a very, very important topic. So thank you for sharing this with us. And sure. I know you have a gift for all of our listeners. So tell us about your gift.
I certainly do. Thank you. So one of the things I hear over and over again is, is it worth it to write my book? Like, how do I know? And is it going to work? And do I want to invest the time, money, and energy, et cetera? So for me, yes, you want to make sure the book is going to work at the beginning. So you don't want to just write it and then hope for the best. You want to make sure it's going to work. So my gift is I think it's 25 questions, a 25-question assessment to understand, based on what you know today, right now, if you were to write a book, or if you have a book in process, you can see if the book is going to work based on what you know right now. And if it isn't going to work, you can see the areas that need improvement and where you either need some self-directed help or some professional help to move you closer and closer to the goal.
Well, that's a very valuable gift because unlike Ben, you might be more like me. It could take you a year or longer to write your book. So that is a very valuable gift. And so as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, the link to Ben's gift is in the show notes. Go to the show notes, click on the link. And Ben, where can people connect with you? People want to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me on LinkedIn if you like LinkedIn. And my last name is spelled Gioia. There's a lot of vowels in there. And you can also go to my website, influencewithaheart.com. Once again, influencewithaheart.com.
And no worries, you don't have to spell Ben's last name or remember the website because it's in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, Ben's website, influencewithaheart.com, or his LinkedIn, and connect with him there. You have been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, with my special guest, Ben Gioia, whose company, Influence with a Heart. He is a book coach, strategist, and publishing advisor. And if you found value in listening to today's podcast, please think about one business owner one entrepreneur, one sales professional, somebody that you know that you think would also find value in listening to this podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.